In the heart of the old Sahara, long before the world spoke of Europe's scholars or Asia's silk roads, Africa held our own treasures. Treasures not made of gold or diamonds, but of words. They said that in those days, the desert wind carried whispers of knowledge. The sand dunes hid secrets that only the wise could understand. Among the kingdoms of Mali, Songhai, and the Oyo Empire, there were men and women who guarded something more powerful than swords: books. Far in the ancient city of Timbuktu, where the river Niger curved like a sleeping snake, stood a great library. Not a library of glass and marble. No, this one was made of red clay, palm wood, and patience. Inside, thousands of manuscripts rested in silence. They spoke of medicine, stars, numbers, spirit, and kings. But outside, the world was changing. Traders wanted gold, soldiers wanted land, and knowledge. Knowledge was being forgotten. In those days, there lived a young scribe named Aminu. He was barely 20, with dark, gentle eyes and hands that always carried ink stains. Aminu walked under the old scholar, Malam Bako, the keeper of the library of Sankore. Malam Bako was said to be over 70 years old, his beard white like desert salt. He had spent his whole life copying manuscripts by hand, line after line, page after page. He often said, "A people that forgets its words, forgets itself." Aminu listened, but he was restless. He had heard tales from travelers about Oyo, a powerful kingdom far to the south. There they said kings ruled with honor and warriors carried steel. One evening, as the desert sun burned orange, word reached Timbuktu. The southern traders were no longer just traders. They were conquerors. Among them was a fearsome warlord named Basharon Adekunle, a man from the Oyo lands. His army moved with the force of a storm. Town after town fell silent as his warriors marched. He sought one thing: the Book of All-Knowing, a manuscript said to hold ancient secrets of power, written by African sages before the first white ship touched the coast. But that book, unknown to most, rested in the library of Sankore. When Aminu heard of Basharon's search, fear filled him, but Malam Bako only smiled sadly and said, "Even a sword cannot cut wisdom that hides in the mind." The night the desert trembled. The attack came without warning. Timbuktu's night sky glowed red as flames devoured roofs. Warriors stormed through the city, shouting in Yoruba and Hausa, seizing scrolls, breaking doors. Aminu and Malam Bako ran into the library. "Save what you can," shouted the old man. They stuffed manuscripts into cloth bags, their hearts pounding. Suddenly, the great door broke open. Basharon Adekunle himself entered, tall, broad-shouldered, his chest bare except for iron chains around his neck. His eyes glowed like fire. He looked at the old scholar. "Where is the Book of All-Knowing?" Malam Bako stood firm. "Knowledge is not stolen, it is earned." Basharon laughed, a sound like thunder, and raised the sword, but before he could strike, Aminu shouted, "Stop, I'll show you." Aminu led Basharon to a small room at the back of the library. He knew there was no such thing as the Book of All-Knowing. It was a myth meant to protect the manuscript. But fear made his steps weak. He reached for one of the oldest scrolls, one written in ink so faded that it looked like the sand itself. This is the book," he whispered. Basharon grabbed it and laughed. "So this is the secret your people die for? Paper?" He turned to his men. "Burn the rest. Knowledge is useless to the hungry." And that night, the fire of ignorance rose high into the desert sky. When dawn came, Timbuktu was quiet. The air smelled of ash. Malam Bako sat among the ruins, coughing softly. Aminu wept beside him. "You gave him one of our oldest texts," said the old man, his voice weak but calm. "I had to," Aminu cried. "He would have killed you." Bako smiled faintly and said, "Then I would have died guarding the soul of our people. But now you must live to rebuild it." Before sunset, the old scholar breathed his last, his hand resting on a pile of scorched manuscripts. Aminu buried him beneath the baobab tree outside the city and swore he would not rest until the stolen scroll was returned. So he began his long journey south, across rivers, through forests, and into the heart of the Oyo Empire. Oyo in those days was a marvel. Wide roads, tall gates, and markets filled with traders from across Africa. At the center stood Delphin, the royal palace, a vast compound of red clay and gold, guarded by the king's warriors, the Eso. Basharu Adekule had brought the stolen scroll to the palace, hoping to use it to gain favor with their laughing King Olufade. But the king, wise and cautious, looked upon the scroll with doubt. He said, "A man who burns wisdom cannot understand what he holds." Still, he ordered that the scroll be kept in the royal archives. When Aminu arrived in Oyo disguised as a trader, he saw the city's pride and pain. He saw how the people worshipped wealth but forgot wisdom. He saw children who could fight but not read. And he knew the same fire that burned Timbuktu was beginning to burn here too. While in Oyo, he met Morunkeji, the daughter of the royal librarian. She was strong-willed, her skin glowing like polished bronze, her eyes sharp with curiosity. She had learned to read secretly, for in those days, women were not encouraged to study. Morunkeji discovered Aminu's secret one night when he sneaked into the royal archives. "You're not a trader," she whispered. "You are the scribe from the north." Aminu nodded. "And you are not just a librarian's daughter. You read what others fear." Together, they made a plan to recover the stolen scroll. While they were growing closer, Aminu began to see how divided Oyo had become. Chiefs fought for wealth, priests for power, and the king for peace. One night, as thunder rolled over the city, Basharu Adekule learned of Aminu's presence. He sent men to capture him, but he escaped with Morunkeji's help. They hid inside the temple of Orunmila, the god of wisdom. There, Aminu spoke softly. "Knowledge is not meant to rule. It is meant to guide." And for the first time, Morunkeji believed that books could change kingdoms. But not everyone agreed. One of the palace guards, jealous of Aminu's closeness to Morunkeji, betrayed them. Basharu's men stormed the temple, capturing Aminu. They tied him in the palace courtyard as thunder rolled again. Basharu said, "You will die where wisdom dies." But just as he raised the sword, the king appeared. "Adekule, enough! You have filled my city with fear, not wisdom." He turned to Aminu. "What did you come for?" Aminu replied, "To remind the world that the strength of Africa lies not in its walls, but in its words." The king paused, his eyes softening. He ordered that Aminu be freed and that the scrolls from Timbuktu be returned to the scholars of the north. Years passed. Aminu and Morunkeji returned to the rebuilt city of Timbuktu. Together, they founded the House of Eternal Words, a new library open to all who sought knowledge. The walls were filled again with scrolls, each one saved from war or rewritten by hand. When travelers came from far lands, Egypt, Kano, Ife, they found in that place not just books, but the soul of a people who refused to forget themselves. Aminu will often say, "Gold shines for a day, but wisdom lights 1,000 years." Centuries later, when dust covered the old cities and time swallowed their names, some of those manuscripts still survived, hidden in families, buried in walls, or sealed in boxes waiting to be found. And when the wind blows through the desert at night, the elders say you can still hear the whisper of Aminu's ink pen, writing the story of those who refused to let Africa's wisdom die.